Hi, Steve. Okay, let's get going. So welcome everyone to this mWater Workflows workshop, where we'll be having an interactive, hands-on session, building some workflows, let's say starting from a template and tweaking it to a purpose on the one hand, and maybe starting from scratch and just going through the process step by step of what does it actually mean to build a workflow. And as I talk through those options and the sort of steps and what's going on as we go through this, the big idea is to get you more familiar and more confident in building workflow types for yourself, and maybe also sparking some ideas of what it could mean for your organization to deploy these. The first half should be this where I'm driving, and you can follow along if you have the capacity, extra screen or whatever. But of course, we are recording this session as well so that you can follow along later. And if you are already working on some workflow types and have questions, this would be a great forum to discuss that. I wouldn't mind putting one on screen and trying to work through any issues you might have. Or for the second half, if there aren't that many questions, if somebody has a workflow type that they would like to build, we could make a start together and discuss as we go along. So that's the overall plan here, not just me talking, but interaction as well. And as with all more advanced mWater features, Solstice features, I strongly recommend that you just practice, you use them, you learn by doing. On top of which, workflows are a new feature. We are on version 1, and there's a lot more that can be done. So your early participation is really valuable for us because we can get good feedback. What are the actual use cases that I've sort of envisioned here, for example, for a water utility, but could be anything for your other operations and processes as well. Can the system handle it? If it can't, we're strongly incentivized to keep developing it to be better still. Quick recap on workflows. Last week, we had a workflow webinar. The recording is also online, but a big term that encapsulates a big vision from our side that we've been wanting to build for years. And they are a feature that are intended to allow you to transform your business processes into structured, automated workflows that can guide your team every step of the way. So helping you know who needs to be doing what and when, is it being done? And then in that process, structuring the steps and the actions so that what the field technician, for example, might need to have, they'll just have there in their pocket, right? And what that means in the platform, and as we'll see hands-on today, are basically sequences of steps with actions that are connected to each other somehow. So as a simple example, you might have a complaint workflow where you get that complaint to begin with, recorded somehow. That triggers an investigation. Investigation gets assigned to the relevant person, let's say that field technician. They do the investigation, fill out a form. That then moves to the manager, operations manager, let's say, to see if it's actually been resolved. Or wait, actually, this should be the technician resolving or whoever resolving the complaint, and only after that there's the verification step. And then the manager can review, well, was this actually done satisfactorily? Whatever needs to be done in the real world to check that. If it was, then it moves into the closed state. And if it wasn't, it can flow back to the investigation step. And in the platform, how does this big feature, how does it translate to action? In the portal, you'll have seen there's the new workflows page where you can track workflow progress in the portal or bringing it into your dashboards, etc. And you can actually complete the actions if you're a field technician right there in the app. So there's a new part of the tasks tab in the app as well. And we really designed it, thanks to the great abstractive powers of our CTO Clayton, to be very, very flexible and fluid, whether it is a straightforward complaint resolution workflow like this, or if you have something that's really, well established as a process and complex that's developed over years of activity or for whatever reason, and there's this whole branching project path with 5 different possible flows and 100 different components, well, the system should be able to handle that. So very, very exciting set of features. But in its simplest form, just means when we're building it, as we will be doing today, we create steps, and in those steps, there can be one or more actions, such as completing surveys or mini forms, assigning tasks, or setting a timed follow-up. We need to connect those steps somehow. So the system needs to know, well, okay, you've got these 3 steps. How exactly do you get from step 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, maybe 3 to 1 again? And then deployment, which is a familiar concept from surveys that's also in action, slightly evolved here in workflows. So these are the basic ingredients to keep in mind. We'll at least encounter a few new things as well. Custom roles, which are a specific thing to workflows, very powerful. Variables as well, workflow variables. So you might have your 10 steps in the workflow, but you might want to have some variables that kind of hover over all of that, and you can bring in and refer to an update as you need to. For example, the urgency level of a workflow. So you can store that in a variable, and also alerts. So there might be certain rules you want to set up to showcase and really drive this sort of management response that workflows in principle enable for you by alerting things. So you can have rules always specific to the workflow, right? Because it really depends what your process is, so that you can then see the ones which are sort of elevated, yellow alert level, and the ones that are at the danger level, like this is an emergency, there's a flood, there's a leak, 500 people can't have anything to drink, something like that. We really need to address this right now. So those can percolate to the top. So it's not just at all intended to be this academic exercise of compliance ticking, but really something that helps you operationally maximize what you're doing, be effective, catch the ones that are delayed, make sure customers are happy, people's needs are met. And I'd just like to pose you the question as we go through this. If you see areas in the features where you think, in my practical flow of actually managing all the work I do, or our organization doing it, is there something further that the system could still do for you, or do for me in this case? And let us know, because I want to make this an amazing feature. Okay, enough of the high-level stuff. Let's jump into actually building something, unless anybody has questions or thoughts here to begin with. Welcome to that. So I've muted everyone, but we've got the chat going on, and just put your hand up and I'll keep an eye out. Let me minimize this. Okay. So what I want to do here in this first co-creation session is take a template. If you go to create new workflow types, you'll see that there have been a number of new workflow templates added, and take this very general branching template flow, and which I'll just cover here. So that this is a flow where you report an issue, it gets triaged, and then the priority gets set. Is it urgent? If it's not, it goes to sit in a queue, and then it's up to basically the discretion of the operations manager to kind of set the priority and trigger it and send it out to the field technician or whoever should be acting on it. Then that gets acted on, gets reviewed. This arrow here just notes that if the review doesn't pass, it'll kick it back to this step. But if it is an urgent action, you will get the alerts. The field technician needs to be assigned immediately. And if they do, they should have that, the manager, first of all, gets a buzz in their pocket. Hey, this is an urgent issue from whoever reported it. Let's look at this. So it goes through a different flow. And this is just 2 branches. These 2 branches could be anything. And you can bend it to whatever use case you have, or add a 3rd branch and so on. So what I want to do is just take this template and slightly bend it. This is what I envision what will workflow deployment often look like, is that we'll have this growing library of templates, and you'll pick the one that's closest to what you're doing, and then bend it, then move bits around instead of building everything from scratch each time. So where we'll go is take this general branching template and turn it into a water service interruption report. And that's the flow, as you can see, visually similar, but we'll have it reporting an issue, change the terms, change the roles, add a few questions that make it specific to the water service interruption report here. Okay, so that's what we're doing. So let's get to it. I'll jump over to the portal here, and you'll know the workflows tab is now under manage at the moment, maybe permanently. Go here, and if you've not created any before, this list will be blank, but it'll have a button here at the top to start a new workflow type. Otherwise, we can start one from the top right here. And here are the templates that I mentioned. So a week ago, we had these 2. Now we have these 4 additional ones. And as the list grows, I expect this view will become more searchable and advanced and nuanced and so on. So we've got this branching workflow, a simple issue resolution flow, water point repair and a new customer connection request, courtesy of Fami. So let's start with the branching workflow. And this is what we get. So something that's already pre-built, no alerts or warnings. So this is in theory ready to go. Let me just cover what's here already from the top. What are the steps? There's that first step, as we saw on the slide, describing the task. There's a path here, a branch. If we look at the action, there's this, you're kind of describing what's the task. What is it? Is it urgent? The urgency question is required. We'll look at the details here, but in a bit, but who can do it, who can be assigned, essential steps in any action inside a workflow step. And here's the automation. Here's the branching part of it, is that the variable is set, so we can raise the alert, and here's the transition rule at the bottom. So in the bottom of this action, we are checking there was this question, standard or urgent. If it is standard, we go to the queue step, as we saw on the slide, the upper branch. And if it is urgent, we go to the immediate action step. So I wanted to give an overview. So here's the start and the evaluation and the evaluation in the action, and then stepping to the queue step, where there's an assignment whenever the operations manager wants to, or then the immediate action, in which case there's a notification and the action here. This is the action that happens from the queue. There's the review. So both of the urgent one and the non-urgent one will converge upon a review if it's complete. We'll look at that action. We see that, again, if the action wasn't completed and it's urgent, then it goes kicked back to the immediate action step. More needs to be done. Otherwise, it goes to this regular action. And once that's passed, it goes completed. So this is the flow as it stands. Notice also that we have this automatic overview. I think we'll evolve the view of it, but still pretty neat what it can do, giving you the visual flow of it. So essentially the slide I showed, you make the urgency determination, it'll go to the queue or the immediate action. You have that assignment action in the queue step. The action happens eventually, and it goes to review. But similarly, from immediate action, once it's been assigned and done, it'll flow to the review step. But this gets a bit messy here, I suppose, but from review, it can flow back to action, or it can flow back to the immediate action. So I think we can do a bit better in the fullness of time in showing this, but hopefully this, along with what's shown on the right side here, can help you make sense of it. Also, for these templates, I've created documentation, so you'll be able to read what the purpose is. And I also recommend that you add some documentation to the workflow types that you create. So high level, that's it. Now let's go through this step by step to make this more of our own water service interruption report. So I know that my process, I want to have something similar like this. So let's go through the steps. I haven't looked at the configuration. This is sort of a new concept a little bit. They're always different by workflow type. So let's go through everything step by step clearly, and slow me down if there's anything unclear. So I mentioned on the slides that there are variables. Variables are things that are sort of accessible throughout the workflow. And they can be different data types. Add a new one. Can be a choice question, text, true, false, and so on. So something that you want to elevate to something else, or make sure it's available easily outside of the workflow when you're visualizing things for the alerts and things like that, or whatever. And these can be sort of set automatically if an action goes a certain way, right? So you could have 100 questions in a survey, and if the water quality parameter doesn't pass, you could have a variable saying this, water quality fail. But here, of course, it's standard or urgent. Do we want to rename that? We could just call it emergency instead, just to show how that's possible. It's a single choice, so it has to be one or the other, and that's a variable. Summary fields are what make it easier to identify the issue when you're looking at it in that table of all workflows, right? When we've got them in action. So right now it's just going to generate a code. But for example, if you have a custom water point ID, and these are water point related ones. You might want to display that, or the name of the community, or the name of the technician. Well, that I guess is there, but whatever it could be. We don't need to have the urgency since we're going to have that as an alert. So summary fields, this is great when you want to customize a bit in this workflows tab. What actually helps you identify, oh, this is the specific workflow. We've got 50 service interruptions we're handling for this city. How do we talk about them? How do we pick them out? Alerts. You can have many alerts. And as mentioned at the start, this would help you. The intention is that this helps you really, if you're using this on a regular basis, many times a day, daily, weekly, you know where to pay attention. So if we add alert, it can have a label, anything you want. I like to keep it short. It can have a severity. So these are the 3 levels, is just a little bit of extra info: warning, yellow alert, danger, red alert level. And condition. So when do you show this alert? So you can use the standard expression library and expression building in mWater Solstice to make these things. And here, since we have this variable, whenever the variable is emergency, we're going to see the alert. We can make this better, right? We could say that when it's an emergency and the workflow is active. So it's not in a draft state and it's not completed. So we can, of course, filter out the completed ones anyway, but maybe we shouldn't accidentally have anything like this here. So now any workflow, once it's deployed and in use, if it's marked as emergency and it's active, so it's not been resolved, it's going to show up with that red alert. Other ideas for alerts include timed difference, right? If something's overdue, we assign this to you now a week ago, and it's still stuck in the same step. So you can use the days since formula, for example, to make it work that way. And I'm sure you can come up with all kinds of rules, depending on your exact business process. When should it be escalated, right? So use this alerts area here in the configuration to create the rules to inform your managers on what really needs to be attended to. Custom roles, just go through these step by step. So these are just really buckets, placeholders for the actual roles in your organization, in your business process. So these are really down to the deployment specific permissions. So because you might have the same, let's say, water service interruption report, and you might be working with 3 water utilities, let's imagine. But of course, the field technicians, the responders, the managers, they're different people in the different utilities. But in our survey deployments, we don't have those concepts of a field technician as opposed to an enumerator. You might have 5 different roles in a complex workflow. So here we'll just allow you to create these buckets that then you can assign on a step-by-step, action-by-action level, so that the workflow system knows who should be able to see what things, who should be able to be assigned at what level, and who can actually do stuff at any given step and action. So for our water service interruption report, let's just rename this Operations Manager. This is just a label, just the text for our understanding. And these are groups, of course, so you can have 100 people be in the field technician role, 1,000 people, doesn't matter. Sub-workflows I wasn't going to cover, but sometimes in complex cases in our development for UNICEF Madagascar, we realized that you might need to be able to trigger like a different workflow that happens at this point, right? So imagine a big project and you get to, the investigation step, like where do we actually want to drill this borehole? Well, maybe you have a predefined 10-step process for how do you determine that, and you use it in 5 different workflows somehow. So you could trigger that sub-workflow using these sub-workflows if you brought them in. Not going to touch that here. Entry point. Every workflow needs to have a way to start, and you can have many, and different entry points can take you to different steps right away. So sometimes you might want to skip ahead for whatever reason. We have this manual workflow. So what are the options? Manual entry point. This is just a user action. That means that here in the portal, once this is deployed, you can just say, hey, start a new inspection, interruption report, I mean. If you want to have it reported from a site, you can, of course, right? So if it's water service interruption, you might want to have an additional starting point from a water point. Let's do that, I think. And what it's just saying is give it a name so that in the app, in the portal, it's clear, verbally clear. Description, additional way to make it more clear. And then crucially, you have to pick the step where it goes. So we're just going to go to the beginning, to our step number 1. Automations we haven't talked about, and I'm giving you a lot of concepts here. Automations are actions that are performed after the entry point is triggered, or within actions, they are things that happen automatically after the action is complete. At the moment, there's a couple of automations that can be. So you could have a variable, and we'll see this in use. How does the emergency level get actually set, right? We created the variable, so we've got this place to store, and the system expects that we have this standard or emergency variable, and it can be one of the two. But that alone doesn't, for any given workflow, it doesn't actually say which one it is. And just having it as an alert also doesn't say what it is. We actually need to have a bit where the system gets told, is it standard or urgent? We'll see that in step 1. And the other one is assignment. So you might have like branches and say, okay, well, sometimes if this is started from the entry point here, a certain role should be assigned automatically, and so on. I would, as a side note, envision that this set of entry points, as well as automations, is going to grow in our workflows feature over time, right? So you might have some kind of more different programmatic entry point where sensor information sends you certain levels. So a table might have a KPI or a sensor pressure or something like that. And then it's below a certain level or above a certain level, and that starts a workflow, right? So you could have things like that. Hi, Aryan. And if you want to disable a starting point, you can do that here. But right now, I guess what we want to choose is who can actually start these. Is it just the person who is a deployment manager? I think an operations manager can start this. Up to you whether a field technician can start it. You could even add a third role for, I don't know, customer support. People who are receiving these reports as part of their job, and they should be the ones who can, register and say, hey, there's this issue, go do something with that. Maybe we'll do that right now. So as I think about this, maybe we want to do that. So let's say customer support is another role. So how can this whole thing get started? Well, maybe somebody calls your utility, and customer support, any of the team gets it, and they can go and start that workflow. That's all we need. We can add another one for a water point. Are we okay on time? Let me give a quick win and keep on going. Workflow steps. So here, step 1. What is the task? Is it urgent? We can do that. I guess we could call this report issue instead. And of course, we want to describe. Here we see a mini form. So as a recap, a mini form is a survey in terms of its function, but it doesn't exist in the surveys list. It doesn't exist outside of the workflow. It isn't reusable in other places. Very, very handy if you just have a couple of questions you want to complete on a step or in an action in a workflow, and you don't want to pollute your list of surveys because it's not really a proper survey. It's just a couple of things you want to ask, or maybe more than a couple. So here, of course, we can rename this to emergency. And critically, when I talk about bending the template to your purposes, this is exactly where you can start easily to bend it by, saying, giving more information here, like maybe the standard here could mean intermittent issue with low pressure, discoloration, minor leak, or if it's an emergency, you can just tell the user, there's no water, major leak, contamination suspected, so on. And you can add more questions, right? Let's cover this piece in detail now. So let's say this is all we want to know at this step. What's the issue? Now, of course, we could ask the water point, the location, things like that. But let's leave it simple. How often is this performed in the workflow? Well, this isn't a looping workflow, apart from at this step anyway. So I'll just leave it here, once per step. The difference here is once per workflow is, even if you happen to come back to this step, loop back to this step 1 for some reason, it won't ask this action again if you've done it once. Who can perform it? So this is who can fill this out, right? Let's say that the customer support person certainly can. ops manager can as well, right? So we created that customer support role. Let's make sure they can actually do stuff here. Who can view these details? Well, let's say customer support people, all of them in this deployment should always see it. Whoever gets assigned this workflow can see it. The creator, why not operations manager? And this was the variable, right? This was already coming from the template. So since we have this variable in our workflow, standard or emergency, this is now linking to the question here. So let me rebuild that. If I didn't have this, I could just say set variable, standard or emergency. It's going to be whatever the answer to the question is this urgent is. If it's standard here, it's also going to be standard in the variable, right? And then that's going to drive our alert, right? So it's already determined here at the first report step, and that also triggers the flow. And this was the branch I mentioned earlier. So given that that question has to have an answer, it's going to mean that once this action is complete, it's going to transition the workflow from step 1 to either the queue step, not urgent, let's prioritize it how we need to, or immediate, let's buzz the operations manager, and so on. So if we wanted to have the pocket of the operations managers go off, the push notification happen, we can add another automation here. So we can say that operations managers get a note assigned if urgent is emergency, right? So here I'm imagining a real world case where the ops manager, let's say, has a morning session where they review the incoming issues normally. But if it's an emergency, we want people to immediately react. So I can have this automatic assignment going to the ops manager here. That's the idea here. I'll also mention that there's this step level. I'm clicking the step here at the top right. There's this fall through option. So it'll go to the queue if all the actions are done. If you accidentally made a change that this wasn't required or something, and it gets sent, it's not going to get stuck. If there's something wrong in the logic of the workflow, like there's a dead end path, or the system can't find a way from step A to step B, there's going to be a warning or alert here at the top. So it's smart enough to tell you what should be going wrong. Let me step through all of this so we have some time for conversation. So let's assume it's non-high priority. It's going to go to step 2. We're going to have our assignment, manual assignment. So it's going to sit in this queue step until the operations manager effectively assigns a field technician. Now you could just limit this to field technicians. So slowly, who can be assigned? So at this step, it's in the queue. We're asking, who can it be assigned to? Well, let's say only field technicians can actually resolve it. So let's say only field technicians should be assigned, but many of them might be selected. Who can do the assigning? This is where we're determining that the operations manager can do the assigning. There's no transition here because we have a transition at the step level, just saying as long as it's been assigned, as soon as the assignment is done, this moves to the action step. So it just happens to be in number 4 here. Action taken. This is something we want to adjust to our use case, right? So something's actually being done to the problem. So now we could say, okay, well, what do I want to know about the problem? I could say describe the service interruption. So the technician can go ahead and write something about it, or we have a choice field or whatever. And you could have things like location question or number question, how many households affected, right? So entirely dependent on what you want to know. Add a customer contact number, mindful of who can view it, right? And anything that kind of is useful and necessary in your flow. And again, who can perform it? Let's make sure that the one who's been assigned this, whoever it is here as well. So this is just filling that form after something's been done, right? So system doesn't go out into the world yet, not this year, and have a robot do it for you, maybe in the future. And here we have this transition at the step level as well. So once again, what does this say? The action step, called action, maybe we rename it standard action. Once all the actions are done in it, it'll just go to the review step. There's only one action. It'll always just flow down. Now, if instead we had the emergency, it's going to take the workflow to the immediate action step. And from there, it's going to transition to review. It's going to have that urgent assignment. And once the thing has been assigned, we'll have the technician take a look at this. Now, you could ask other questions here. Of course, this other flow, whatever is relevant. But you know how to create questions, so I don't need to spend too much time there. But the same elements are present here, right? And the transition was done at the step level. Now we have the review. The review step has the action, is the action successfully completed or not? Let's make that required so we can control the flow as well. Who can do that? Well, the operations manager, workflow creator, those are the people who can do the review. The technician shouldn't be doing it. Customer support, probably not either. And here the transition is branching again. So if it was an emergency action, but it's not resolved, then it's going to go back to the immediate action part. Could be reassigned at that point to another technician. Standard action just goes. We could explicitly add here, say that it's going to go to the completed step if the action is marked as complete. This just makes it very clear the three possible directions that this step can go to. Okay, little breather. Yes, good suggestion here. Yeah, but let me get to that later. I'll just go through this whole step of we've taken the template. Great, we saved ourselves an hour from having to figure out the basics again. We've understood it and tweaked it to our particular water service interruption workflow. Great. To actually have it be live, let's add a deployment as we do. So let's put myself as the admin. Let's have the operations manager there, and the field technician could be my team of field technicians. I'm sure there's one, that one. Okay, and customer support, another person, or multiple people, right? So these would depend really on your exact workflow and your deployment, whatever the split you want to have. So this keeps it flexible. Once we've got a deployment, we can start creating workflows. So either by default, you can go to the workflows tab, which is sort of the workbench of the workflows view. Once you've designed it, you wouldn't be going back to the design very much if you're happy with it. You would actually spend your time here in the workflows view, seeing how, are they being closed on time and so on, or you're building your own console dashboard, etc., where you're using this as a data source. But this is one path where you can start the workflow. So let me just go through that flow that we've worked on here. So let's say there's a massive leak and it's an emergency. So this is just step one. Submit. You'll see that the workflow processes that and moves it to the next bit. Now we'll see that it's urgent. So if I were to come, I'll see it as yellow. Maybe that's not even concerning enough. And I go and say, actually, this is a danger. It's a flood. Let it save. And now it's a red alert whenever it's an emergency. Okay, I'll go back to that. Because it's an emergency, we need to assign it. So the list here will be the people in my field technicians team. So do I give it to Taylor Swift, Annie, PA training? Let's give it to PA training. So now that technician gets a push notification on their device. They can see what the report is, and it's up to them to take the action. We could add another alert to sort of say, you need to report in a day, or else the operations manager gets a buzz, however you want to do it. So let's say first mains, So if the repair was done, 500 households were affected. And we can then, I'm doing it all in the same interface, right? But it would be in the app, let's say, where that could be done. But let's say, oh, wasn't quite complete, whatever reason, keeping it simple. It should now go back to the, oh, did in my testing. I think it's because I have this overriding design step here. This one, it evaluates that first. So I think it evaluated that first before evaluating the thing. It shouldn't be completed, right? Because I said it's not complete. So I'll just make sure we handle that. So leak, let me go through that flow again. Mark it as an emergency, needs to be assigned. User gets buzzed. User does something. Should mark some of those as required, most likely. Manager reviews it. Not quite good enough yet. What I should do is go back to the assignment. Let's try a better technician this time, not leave it to Petri. And so on. Now this Binepe has been on it. Things actually got resolved, and so on. And here from the endpoint of the workflow, you'll see the whole history and you can check the steps, right? So as we go through it, it's a branching logic. As we look at it from behind, there's this one path that we always could take. Right. Let me pause for a bit. Got a question from Aryan. Hi, Aryan. Is it possible to trigger start a workflow based on a specific survey result? Certainly will be. In a survey, you have a functionality question, and based on that answer, that it partially working and needs repairs, and workflow is automatically opened. Yes. There is a trigger workflow question within a survey in the following way. If you were to have a survey form, so not triggering a workflow, you might have something at the moment, you'd pick something, and then in your automation, right, you can refer to the survey response. Or get an error. Maybe I shouldn't have clicked the response itself, but the tree. But the idea there is doesn't quite yet trigger from a survey. I can see the value in that. We're going to build it, but right now you can have a step and an action in a step where you fill a survey, and depending on how that survey gets filled, something else can happen in a workflow. Right. Any questions, anybody else? I'll at least spend 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes building from scratch, but was this way too fast? Did this make sense? I know there's new concepts in the mWater universe here. It's not the simplest thing, but that's an additional reason why I want to make myself available to help some of you design these things. Do you see value in this? We had very positive responses from our trainings in Uganda in terms of people seeing how this can be valuable. So I'll just have a sip and wait if you've got any questions. See, some are coming.
Petri, I have a question. It's
Sure,
about the transitions. So one thing I've observed is that you can set transitions at the step level, that the entire step, including the actions, would transition to a given next step if a given criteria are met, but also transitions within actions. Specific indications of setting those transitions within actions or within the steps? Like, when would I set it within an action and when would I set it within a step?
Right, because you can do it there as well. I would say that it depends a bit on the complexity of the step. I haven't yet myself built very complex steps with 5 actions, but if you have a step that can go in many different ways, but it's never just one step, right? Maybe here's a different way to think about it. Let's say you have 3 actions in a step. What you don't want to do is have the transition in action 1, because as soon as action 1 is complete, it's going to transition. Now, is that what you want, or is it not what you want? Do you want to make sure that action 2 and action 3 also get completed? If you have more than one action and the design is that more than one gets filled out, you want to use the step level, right? Because you can say here that action 1, action 2, action 3 all need to be complete, or at least action 1, action 3. Like maybe there's an optional step 2, right? So if you're doing it at the step level, you're taking that higher picture, higher view, and not waiting, not allowing it to trigger immediately when an action is done. Conversely, if there's one action and the transition is defined here, it's evaluated in order and immediately, right? So if this is true at this point, it's just going to forget about the other actions in the step and jump into that specified other step. Make sense?
Yes, sure.
Great. Steve, hi Steve. Similarly to Aryan's question, could there be an automatic trigger for when a site with certain attributes or conditions is registered? Good suggestion, right? Okay. So site, it's just created, right? I'll take a note of that. Yeah, these sort of survey gets filled out a certain way or site gets created a certain way can be done. Whether it's a time process, how do we go through all the, the site will hit the server and only when it's there and not, not offline. Or should it be offline? Maybe that's a follow-on question. Would you imagine that it should create a workflow somehow offline? Yeah. So from that, Steve, you're interested in helping staff remember to fill out the numerous different surveys related to site once it's registered. It sounds like it should work offline, right? It shouldn't be caring at all about whether it's synchronizing. Plus correct order. Offline creation, yes, does do, but link to something happening on a site, not yet. But certainly we are looking to expand. And then Aryan, yes, how do you have a monthly reminder set up? Do meter reading. Oh, well, that was going to be my second example, actually. Hopefully we have time. But if not, I'll show my existing one. So for my second example, what I was thinking was the scheduled inspection. So this answers Aryan's question. Depends a little bit. Is it supposed to be regularly every month? Or is it supposed to be 1 month from the previous visit? So there's different approaches. But here I started from scratch. Very simple scheduled inspection for field technician, ops manager. Designate the asset, assign who should inspect it. The inspection is done. There's a checklist, very simple sketch here, but you have your 50 questions, however many, for checking a pump, let's say, and goes to complete. Now, Aryan, to answer your question, in this action, we have a timed action option. So it'll kind of sit in this complete state for this asset, right? And if depending on kind of whether you have some steps that are recurring or once per workflow, then it'll wait 6 months or 1 month, let's say. And then it's going to loop from complete to scheduled again. And if you always wanted it to work for the same asset, you would just define the asset once. You say once per workflow here, and then that never gets changed, right? It's going to go from complete to scheduled again, but it's still going to remain the same designated asset. It's just going to ask for this inspection again. Okay, so this one was the timed action. And if there's a week-long delay in inspecting it, you're going to get that next one perfect. And I'll share these, of course, afterwards. If you wanted it to be recurring, so you would have some kind of loop that runs, as it says, executes repeatedly every time the delay elapses. So you could have like a recurring flow, a workflow that runs once per month, regardless of whether the previous inspection was done, and then perform like start a sub workflow, like just sort of send off a little minion workflow to happen, right? But then the clash there is that with some delays, you're going to end up having like, I just did an inspection, but then tomorrow I have to do another one. Well, yeah, because it's just a monthly flow. Right. Just checking I'm up to date on all of this. Some surveys have to be regularly. Yes. And for that kind of stuff, aggregation, all of your workflow is available as a data source, and it's very neat and elegant where you can kind of pick you pick the workflow as the data source, and then you see the related surveys and the mini forms and everything. So if you have the workflow as a data source, you can build really powerful dashboards around it as well that really help you stay on top of that, but not so much the focus here today. Still had a few things to show, not that slide. These are from last week's as well. Just in case some of you are joining outside the water utility space, these were kind of wash-focused examples. But really, hopefully you'll see that the workflow feature is not at all tied to just water or wash. I would hope that since Solstice use, our sister platform Solstice for all the SDGs is growing with thousands of new users every month, there's a lot that could be done with workflows in other areas as well. So keep that in mind, encourage your colleagues, get in touch, etc. As mentioned, it links to a bunch of things already, and we're going to deepen those links. And still more stuff is coming, expanding that template library, passing variables into surveys, connections AI onboarding. Now, one more question from Steve. I use the answers in the mini form to guide transitions. Can answers or metadata from surveys to be used for transitions as well? The answer is yes. Yes, you absolutely can. If I were to have a survey form action instead, I'll demonstrate. Pick one, and then we have the transition to completed would happen unless there's 6 errors. Oh, it's a bug, but it will happen. That's my bad. We'll need to fix that. But yes, the intent very much is you can do that. Yeah, not trying to coral you into mini forms only. As usual, we've got guides, step-by-step guides, overall guide, these videos, and the Resource Center video channel. I mentioned at the start, I'll reiterate now, I'd want to give a bit of extra love and care for you who are building workflow designs to begin with to get you started. So if you have requests, if you can get these in this month, we can schedule support in for next month. I expect this will be an area where some organizations will need more of our time. So I fully expect this will be something that we'll be able to dedicate time to next year, but on a costed basis, because as you can see, it can get quite involved and require expertise. So if you get in early with support requests, it'll help us catch bugs, improve, fix. It's a win-win. If you delay, go to next year, and he is going to come after you and ask for the money that we justly need for developing awesome features. And last thing, before maybe final questions, I wanted to give a teaser on a related new thing that's happening. Our first deployment of agentic AI is coming. I don't know if the thing here shares audio if I play it on my desktop. So I'll post this 4-minute video teaser of our alpha version of agentic AI integrations of data from other platforms to ours. I suspect if I press play, you won't hear it. Yeah. That's okay. That was just a nice bonus for you patiently sitting through this webinar workshop. So the link is yours for dessert, and we can focus on final questions. But in a nutshell, super elegant, smart way to just paste your API documentation, have a little chat with AI for free, and it will build a find out the right data structure, suggest the tables, allow you to tweak it. You can then set up the timing and so on. So really trying to get it at the capacity to bring data in from other platforms, from being available to just the few % of programmers using the platform to basically everybody, or certainly a much wider audience. So UNICEF Madagascar funded work, which I think will multiply the amount of interesting and useful data being brought into the platform. Okay, hi, Abdul Rahman. So the templates, you should see not when you first go to the workflows page, shouldn't be dependent on your user, but just if you click new workflow type, you should see this simple card-like view. Very strange if you don't. Do a deep refresh of your portal first to get the latest version if you don't, and these will show up. This will get unwieldy once we've got 20 of these, so we'll have some. I would envision something like the indicator library also for workflows, where you can read more about them. Great. So this has been very useful for me. Some bugs came up and some really good steers for that site creation and survey creation. I think that's been discussed as well. We have a few more minutes. Any final questions from the mWater team? Anybody else? Before we start winding this down. When is the button in the app visible? Yeah, well, yesterday, based on Annie's demands. We'll want to add a little alert to the button, because workflows, the feedback we get, and what makes sense is that getting a workflow addressed is sort of a step above in importance to just filling out a survey usually, or you know, if it is that important, then you've put that survey in a workflow, right? So we need a button that sits on the homepage, but also gives you a little number to say, look, there are 5 workflows that have been assigned to you. Not just that you can view them, not that just they exist, but you've been assigned these things. So let me get that done today. We didn't want to make it immediately visible before we'd gotten some bug testing done. So that's just the slow down. Oh, Hector, hi. We're just winding up. Last questions, 4 minutes. Can this send an alert when a site with a certain attribute is updated or deleted? Right. Well, this, I guess, links to, so no, not at the moment, but that's because we don't have that sort of site created leads to a workflow. I can envision there being a workflow for a site update, property change, and I suppose deletion falls within that. So I'll take a note that we'd need that as well. Update notification if site updated or deleted. I'll take that under advisement. Yeah, thanks, Ariane. Yeah, maybe the button should be conditional, but then you lose out on the prospect of like you have to be part of a deployment. But if you can start one, you should see it. Not just have it assigned to you, but if you can also start a workflow, maybe that's the intent for you. So yeah, that doesn't need to show for absolutely everyone in the world. All right. Maybe just to find out, was that a useful exercise to do? Was it useful to follow along or too fast or something? Just a general thumbs up, down. Can you suggest an Arian? I know you're an excellent trainer in general. If you were training on workflows remotely like this, what would your suggestion be? I think this is a complex set of things. So I want to get better at communicating it.
Maybe just I'll pick up the mic, but I think it's really, really useful to see this and go through. And I think for all of us here, it is when we start doing our own ones that we really start getting into the nitty-gritty. And for everything, I think that's what we all have to do. What is it? We first listen, then we do, and only then you can start thinking of training anyone. And at the moment, most of us are listening, and we'll start the doing in the next period, days, weeks, and months. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Arian. Good to hear from you. Yes, exactly. What could be a better Christmas period than working on workflows? But that's exactly right. Hopefully these starter templates make that whole stuff a bit easier. And yeah, absolutely feel free to email and get in touch over the next weeks. We'll respond when able. Thank you very, very much for your patience and following along, everybody. I'll post the recording online, and yeah, catch you on the other side. There'll be more webinars coming next year. Thanks, everybody. Catch you soon.